Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, of course, one of the greatest assets that Marvel Studios has, and has always had since its inception, is that it has an image of caring about both the fans and the content. That is something that time and time again we've all highlighted when we've been concerned about something, potentially concerned, or comparing them to why Marvel gets things right and DC doesn't. It's always boiled down to that respect, again, for the fans and the content. And it's been fascinating over the last few days to watch that image begin to crumble. So Marvel's spin doctors, I hope, are working day and night to turn this thing around, and if they don't have any spin doctors, they should be hiring them. Just as they're working to hire a new director for Ant-Man. Now that's going to be our first story today. Marvel had one good little bit of good news about the Thanos casting. That'll be the third story of the day. But these, unfortunately for them, these negative stories are dominating the headlines more than this Thanos voice casting. And that might have been part of the Marvel spin machine to try and, change the conversation, and it didn't work because these other stories not only are very juicy, but again, they fly in the face of the Marvel Studios image, and they indicate Disney beginning to have a corporate strategy injected into the company, just like Warner Brothers has done at DC, much to the fans' frustration and annoyance. Certainly this fans. So anyway, as I said, first story, they're working very hard to hire a new Ant-Man director. And I think that based on the choices they're considering, Edgar Wright must have been the one to quit. He must be the one to leave them in the lurch, and he must have been very upset to do that because this has created a very embarrassing situation for Marvel. And the reason I say that Edgar Wright must have quit is because they're trying to replace him with somebody who's very similar, another comedic director, and also directors that have better track records at the box office, but not so much that you would be like, oh, well, now we feel better than when we used Edgar Wright. I also had said, and a number of other trades had felt this way, that maybe Marvel felt Guardians of the Galaxy was already their quirky film, and they wanted something a little bit more mainstream that fit in better with the rest of the universe. But again, the choices they're considering for Edgar Wright's replacement are also very outside the box and don't fit in with the other directors they've chosen. All right, so before we go any further, who are those choices that I keep referencing? Well, one is Rawson Marshall Thurber. He was the director on We're the Millers, very big summer hit, but of course, do you really see him directing a comic book movie? At least one that fits with the Marvel brand. He also directed Dodgeball, that Ben Stiller, Vince Vaughn comedy from a long time ago. So that was not as big a hit as We're the Millers. So the guy, it's not like he hits the ball out of the park every time. Also, Ruben Fleischer did a great job with Zombieland, but then my condolences to anyone who had to sit through Gangster Squad like I did. That's Ruben Fleischer's follow-up to Zombieland, which has really brought his career to a crawl. So he's very lucky that Edgar Wright dropped out of Ant-Man because he might be able to get a second shot. And then, of course, Adam McKay. This was the big name. That's Will Ferrell's writing and producing and directing partner. He directed Anchorman 2. I really liked Anchorman 2, by the way. And so I can see that this would be Marvel's first choice. Out of these three, it would be my first choice. But again, I don't understand why you wouldn't have Edgar Wright and replace him with these people. They're not any more of a sure bet, and they don't make the material any more mainstream or fit in more with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as is than Wright did. But anyway, McKay at least has very strong, solid, a whole bunch of solid box office successes. He really, as people have pointed out, worked with Paul Rudd before, so they have that repartee already. And he deals with big budgets and big movies, certainly much more so than the other two choices. So that was all the speculation went towards McKay over the weekend. Everyone was like, he's Marvel's first choice. Wouldn't it be interesting if he did it? And the spotlight was so intense that McKay actually had to address it over the weekend, and he tweeted out that while he had met with Marvel and while he was interested in the opportunity, he just feels he has too many other commitments for it to be a realistic thing to go forward with, that he just honestly can't commit to Ant-Man considering his prior commitments. So, by the way, that makes McKay, I think, a stand-up guy. He hasn't tried to weasel out of his other commitments. He doesn't really need to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's doing quite well with Will Ferrell. Anchorman 2 was very well received. And then he has another comedy coming up that he just wrapped with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart, where Kevin Hart trains Will Ferrell to go to prison after Will Ferrell is accused of a crime. And, it's like basically training this, Will Ferrell, like, white soft guy to go to hardcore jail. And that sounds very funny to me. So I think that sounds like another hit for Ferrell and McKay. So, while it's nice to be thought of, and I'm sure he appreciated going into Marvel and meeting the executives, maybe for another day, this isn't something he needs to do. And he basically took himself out of contention over the weekend. But the fact that they can't get another director is only keeping this story alive longer, that Edgar Wright left. And it looks like it's looking less and less likely they're going to be able to replace him with a choice that makes everyone go, oh, okay, well now I feel better about it, so we don't have to focus on this anymore, we can move on. And I'm sure Marvel is very nervous, as I talked about on Friday, no, on Monday. I think the story, yeah, it's been a week. It's been a week. I'm sure they're very nervous about being approached at Comic-Con, etc., and having to deal with this. And, I don't think Marvel Studios wants to get into a fight with their fans. They really enjoy a wonderful fan experience at these conventions where everybody just says wonderful things about them, and it's like a Marvel love fest, and I think they would like that to continue, not, have a new direction of something that's long happened at DC panels, particularly DC Comics. Fans can get quite contentious at these conventions, saying, why are you doing this? Why did you fire this person, etc. So that's the first story of the day, that Edgar Wright still hasn't been replaced. It's looking more and more like he truly did quit the project because he was so upset about the script changes that were made without his consent, and he was expected to just go along with it. And also, of course, we've heard rumors that Feige fought for Wright, and so did Joss Whedon, but the Disney suits are adamant about these script changes, and they don't care if Wright leaves, which is very scary to hear. All right, so the second story. This is on the Marvel publishing side, but it also factors into the movie situation, and this is probably one of the most disappointing things I've ever heard about Marvel. It's really quite shocking. So Bleeding Cool broke this story. And by the way, Bleeding Cool, I have a relationship with that website. I know Rich Johnson. He's very good at getting scoops. And one of the reasons he gets scoops is that a lot of the people actually at the comic book publishers give him stories. Like when they're upset at DC or Marvel and they can't say anything because they're an employee, they can, kind of vent and feel justice is served by giving the story to Rich, which he runs over on Bleeding Cool. And he's the only comic book news website that's willing to run these stories because he doesn't care if he doesn't get access to, Marvel and DC, the stories that publicity wants to run at those companies. So, he has a very contentious relationship with especially DC, but probably Marvel now as well. So this was the story that a number of you sent to me as well, because it was just so shocking that this was actually happening. So the rumor is that in particular with the Fantastic Four, but also X-Men, but more so with Fantastic Four, it looks like Marvel is going to sacrifice their first family, not only their first family, but arguably the first family in general of comics, to try and hurt Fox's film properties. Now, as the Bleeding Cool article pointed out, and as we've discussed many times, Fox got the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four back in the days when Marvel was bankrupt, before the Disney purchase and before they started making their own movies, which injected a lot of cash into the company. So they just had to make deals. That's the same reason they lost Spider-Man to Sony. And as I've told you, they had to sell part of the rights to the character of Spider-Man to Sony. So that deal will never go away. And I think that Marvel realizes that, Disney Marvel realizes that, which is why you see them work together a little bit more. But the Fox relationship is contentious, not only because I think that I'm sure they haven't been happy what Fox has done with the number of their properties, but also because Fox only has these rights as long as they keep making movies. So it's frustrating, I'm sure, to Marvel and Disney that if Fox just would stop picking at that scab, Fox, and let us heal it, they would get their property rights back. But of course, Fox will never let that happen because it's just too lucrative. And even though they've messed them up to some degree, we've seen with X-Men Days of Future Past, they're able to put them back on the right track. So why don't they want to be a part of this comic book landscape, this comic book movie renaissance of Hollywood? So Marvel's new big idea at publishing is to try and suck the life out of these properties by not publishing comics to fuel the fandom. Yes, you heard correctly. The rumor is that the Marvel publisher, Marvel Comics, is going to put all their Fantastic Four titles on hold, both the Ultimate and 616 titles. 616 means their regular universe. The story, the leaked story, even went so far as to say they've taken down all Fantastic Four artwork in the Marvel offices here in New York City. And they're going to put these projects on hold, and while the characters can somewhat show up in Avengers titles, they're really going to be sidelined. And the same, very sadly, was also said about the X-Men titles. If you're reading Inhumans at all, it's a new title from Marvel. By the way, if they want the Inhumans to become popular, maybe that title should come out on time. I mean, I guess maybe Joe Madureira still hasn't gotten up to his ability to draw things on a regular schedule, which is, I think, one of the reasons he stopped working in comics. But he's a great artist, though, so I can see why they wanted him. But Inhumans 2 just came out, like, I think much later than it was supposed to. And when you read the title, they've only had 2 issues, so you could easily go pick it up on Comixology. They're clearly trying to replace the X-Men with the Inhumans. The Inhumans are now, a sought-upon people who are, a small, tiny nation in the middle of New York City who are fighting for the rights of their people. You get your powers when you're a teenager. Instead of them coming genetically, like puberty, you go through a transformation stage. You willingly expose yourself to the Terrigen mists, and then you get a superpower you have to deal with. And so, this is something that we've discussed before, and some of you have even pointed it out to me, that Marvel is clearly trying to sell the Inhumans as their new mutants in the Avengers universe so that they can start making those kind of films to compete as well, because they know they're never getting the X-Men properties back. And so, of course, the X-Men are better sellers than the Fantastic Four titles, so while they're not going to put those titles on hold, you'll notice that the X-Men never really participate in the rest of the in the Marvel Universe anymore on the page. Occasionally they come in there. There was the X-Men versus Avengers, but that was really to give a lot of attention to the Avengers. And they said that in this leaked story that Marvel will still include the X-Men in company-wide events as long as the Avengers get equal or greater billing. But this is just a really sad development because it really shows a lack of interest to the property and the fans, which, as I said in my opening, were the 2 great aspects of Marvel Studios to begin with. A respect for the material and the respect for the fans. X-Men built Marvel. It was popular, long before, the Avengers comics, to the point where they started, when Marvel Studios started to enlist their B team, that's what the media called it. X-Men is a fantastic company. Spider-Man, I guess, thank goodness they have a better relationship with Sony or we wouldn't be getting any of those comics. And it just also underscores that Disney and now Marvel only view their comic books as promotional pamphlets for the movies. They have no integrity on their own as an art form or a story or a entertainment medium, and they're going to use it as a weapon between them and Fox. And who cares if the fans suffer in the middle? And I'm just, as you can see, I'm actually upset about it because I love my X-Men comics. Fantastic Four, I have to say, I don't think those comics have been very good for a long time, but there goes any chance of Marvel revitalizing the brand and maybe putting some great hot talent on it. I guess we can see why nobody, I guess there are those of you who like Jonathan Hickman, and he certainly has a lot of fans, and they've put him on their Avengers title. But I mean, I guess you can see why the Fantastic Four, the Marvel Now, didn't get a lot of attention. And I just think the whole thing's just incredibly disappointing. And I already can't read DC Comics because New 52 messed them up so much. Batman and X-Men are my 2 favorite properties. And so I've lost one to this horrible development with the movies. And now it looks like, what? I'm going to lose the X-Men, or at least they're going to be sidelined. I'm glad Brian Michael Bendis is on there, but for how much longer if this is true? So I'm curious if you guys find this as offensive as I do, and does it make you feel differently about Marvel as a company that they're willing to do this, despite, as I said, their strength was that they cared about the content and the fans. All right, the third story, the one that Marvel hopes we all pay attention to, is of course that Josh Brolin has been cast as the voice of Thanos. I guess that's his consolation prize after losing out on Batman to Ben Affleck. And apparently he's been in the mix over at Marvel for a long time now because he's already recorded his Guardians of the Galaxy dialogue. And he's also going to be, of course, they said, doing some voiceover work for Thanos and the Avengers 2 Age of Ultron. Now, of course, Kevin Feige has often described Thanos as the big bad, the boss-level villain for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who will probably come into play into Phase 3. Although Phase 3 is falling apart before our eyes, but let's see. So Josh Brolin, I think he's an okay choice. I don't really know. He's not someone who I'm like, wow, what a great voice. It's not like James Spader, who has a really wonderful voice quality. So that's an interesting situation. But the other thing I think is weird is that Marvel is really developing a large voice cast. You've got Vin Diesel as Groot, you've got Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon, James Spader as Ultron, and now, of course, Josh Brolin as Thanos. It's almost like animated movies over there. And I wonder if Marvel can go so far in this direction. It's okay to have 1 or 2 characters, but at what point are you making animated movies? They're certainly, I think, approaching live-action animation hybrid films. And I don't understand why Josh Brolin can't have some makeup work done to actually be on screen. I mean, they could shoot him on a green screen and blow him up if they want to have Thanos be out of proportion to the rest of the characters. I don't know. I would hate to see, what's to keep comic book movies in general from just going to the way of they're all animated with voiceover casts. Now, I've actually been an advocate to that to some degree because I think the DC video game cinematics, for instance, are so superior to the work they've been putting out in live action. Let's see if Batman v Superman proves me wrong and goes in the direction it needs to. I do have some hope for that project, as I've said several times, because I like the casting of Ben Affleck and Jesse Eisenberg. So we'll see. But I mean, it's becoming a very fine line, and I hope that Marvel has some really good animators there who can create the facial movements necessary for these characters really to connect with the audience. But that's, to me, out of that story, what I could take away the most, that Marvel is developing a voice cast. All right, so finally, the question of the day comes from Destiny Ricks. And Destiny says, "Hey Grace, I just want to say that I love your channel. Your channel is a godsend to movie lovers of every age. I'm 17, says Destiny, and I just want to say thanks. My friends think I'm this huge movie buff, but you're truly my secret weapon." Smiley face with a wink. That's awesome, Destiny. A couple of you have written that into me, and I think that's great. I'm glad I can help you, be the most knowledgeable person in your group of friends. And so Destiny continues saying, "I have more of a request than a question. I only started going to the movies my freshman year in high school to see mostly blockbusters, and I wanted to start watching more classic movies or even just good movies that may not be blockbusters. I've recently watched Free or Fall, a German film, and A Dangerous Method, both with relatively sad endings. What movies would you recommend for me to watch? I thought there was no one better to ask than you. Thanks for reading, smiley face, Destiny." What a great request, Destiny. And I've had a couple of you ask me about recommendations for older films. And I think it's great that you guys want to broaden your horizons. Hollywood often feels that mainstream audiences have no interest in older films, which is why they feel they can remake them. And sometimes you do hear disappointing things about, oh, I don't like subtitles, I don't like black and white films. And I think that makes people miss out on some great movies. So I think going forward, I'm going to recommend older films on my Twitter account that have to do with maybe topics in the news or movies that are coming out. And so if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Grace Randolph. One word, Grace Randolph, and Randolph is spelled with a PH. But I will recommend one today in this video for Destiny that I think is appropriate to what's going on in the movies right now. And I have to say, it also has a sad ending, Destiny, but I watched this movie myself over the weekend, and I was really blown away with how fantastic it was, and I think everybody should watch it. Now, we've talked a lot about how Frozen and Maleficent have showcasing female relationships, sisters, mother and daughter, surrogate mother and daughter in the case of Maleficent. And here's a movie that I think you should watch called Terms of Endearment. And it's about a real mother and daughter. And it's a fantastic film. It's won the Best Picture Oscar, Best Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor for Shirley MacLaine, actress, and Best Supporting Actor for Jack Nicholson. It also had a slew more nominations for director, for James L. Brooks, a really talented director with actors and story, letting films breathe, before they were all about special effects. You should watch a number of his films. He's a very talented director and writer. He wrote the screenplay for this. And so Deborah Winger, you might have heard that documentary, Searching for Deborah Winger. What happened to her? She was a big star for a while, as you'll see from this movie, and doesn't work anymore. Although she was recently Rachel getting married. I guess, after that documentary came out, people were like, we should give Deborah Winger work. And she was very good in this movie. I'd never seen it. It slipped through the cracks. One of those films where you're like, I should see it. And of course, while you're watching it, you might notice the music. It has a very famous theme song. So this is a wonderful film. It's a slow burn. Stick with it. It's a character study. James L. Brooks, I believe, for instance, directed As Good as It Gets. And so it's that kind of movie. That's the Helen Hunt, Jack Nicholson film, which also was really loved at the Oscars. So Terms of Endearment, I think it plays in perfectly with what's going on with Frozen and Maleficent and what Disney's trying to do about female empowerment and realistic depictions of female relationships and how men and women interact. It's being done right here in Terms of Endearment. Celebrated film, huge Oscar winner, and really stellar performances across the board from everyone in the picture. It's a very sad movie. Make sure you have a lot of tissues with you so you can watch it. And I think, as I said, again, it ties in perfectly to what we've been discussing with Frozen and Maleficent. So, again, Terms of Endearment, thank you for your question, Destiny, and everybody, you can follow me on Twitter at Grace Randolph, and I'll try and recommend maybe 1 or 2 movies a week, because I know we all have lots to do, and we have to watch a lot of movies that are coming out now, right? All right, so thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.